Hello and welcome to Boyd Digital Live with me, Grant Ruxton, and him, Colin Boyd. This afternoon we're going to talk about social media briefly. The news of the day, the cheap headline of the day, if you like, is Ed Milliband suggests social media is the way to avert war in Libya. What do we think about this? Has social media really become such an instrumental thing in everyday life that it becomes a genuine suggestion to avert, stop, make a war better?
Well, it can go both ways. If it can avert it, Egypt claimed that Twitter and Facebook were leading towards they were organising the demonstrations through Twitter accounts and Facebook pages where they were gathering people. So they are social networks where all the people are. I don't know. How would you use it to avert it? You would put out there kind of propaganda messages, but the government already owns. It depends what side you're at. So, in a war, somebody is very unlikely. I don't think there's been many wars where both sides sit down at some point and say, nobody won, nobody lost. Let's save face and go back to the way it was. It's certainly not going to happen in Libya. Either Gaddafi's going to win or the rebel party's going to win. So somebody's got to push somebody one way or other. So who uses social media best to get their message out to the people?
I think the point of social media is if it's there as a conduit for people to converse and share ideas, the right idea will prevail, or the most popular ideas will prevail, because people will talk about whatever they want to talk about. The more popular ideas will rise to the top and get talked about more.
Yeah, but nothing's moderated. Nothing's moderated. So
that's exactly the point. If it's not
Gaddafi
moderated,
could pay people to go and he was paying people £250 to back him last week. So if they pay you £50 to tweet something about Gaddafi, or do the rebels then use Twitter to organise their people, to use it in a kind of guerrilla warfare style? They can use it to say, well, there's the military are in this street, let's all go to this street, or somebody's here, let's go there, or
if you think about it, there must be two strands to that kind of operational strand where gather in this square, we march at 3 o'clock, but also the getting the people behind you. If you think and go back to the American Revolution, all those years ago when it was the guy in the horse belting through the towns, rallying the troops, people kind of secret meetings where a guy would stand up in a box and put forward the argument for independence. That sort of approach is no longer applicable in this day and age of social media taking over.
Well, the government controls the mass communication channels, so they already have the TV, they already have the radio. So if Mr. Milliband is then suggesting that switch the name servers back on so that people can use social media, then he's suggesting that it's for the people that don't own the mass communication channels, because at the beginning of the Iraqi war, they just there's disaster messages that go up if the telecom systems go down, that they just repeat a disaster message, which in the past, especially in kind of Middle Eastern countries, has always been a propaganda sort of machine at that point. So I don't know if is Ed Miliband really qualified in any way. Essentially he's a guy who's the leader of a party that isn't in power. So
yeah, but he's certainly not taking into account the fact that if the Libyan regime or any other regime worked instead of taking the Egyptian approach of just switching it off, which probably made things worse, because people started accessing it through IP addresses. If a regime started to manipulate social media, like you say, by paying people to out messages to fight fire with fire, you could have a real problem in your hands.
You could stop war before it's happening by using social media to talk to the people. Whereas, if the likes of Gaddafi and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain see these things coming, they can then decide. For instance, Bahrain went a bit kind of full on, and then they backed off, and then now they're going to talk to the people, and they're going to get. If they'd seen that coming and had made the decision, they probably would never make the decision to talk to the people and give them their own way, and use social media to sit down and say, well, how do we get to the people who are informing the groups to get around a table, sit down and see if there's a peaceful way. But you've got to remember this was sparked off the back of Egypt. You know, they had some mass demonstrations. Egypt went a bit mental, and everybody else says, well, if the Egyptians are going to be getting democracy and, you know, BMWs, we want them, you know. So
I think to pull it all together from a social media point of view, social media is a powerful tool. Maybe a bit of an easy option for Ed Miliband to say, yeah,
is it an easy answer?
I think the way he thought about it was, yeah, let's give them their social media back, freedom of speech. The forces of good will prevail. Not thinking about how potentially the system could be gamed by the other side, or what he deems to be the other side. But
well, they had the London riots with the students who used their mobile phones and Twitter to move the crowd faster than the police forces could you know, with helicopters and with everybody with a radio on the same channel, could move their people to block it.
Yeah.
You know, the students were, you know, it was kind of like water running through a kind of street rather than.
I think the students were probably at an advantage there because they're young, they're of that generation, they understand social media. Whereas if the police had the same knowledge of understanding as the students, they could have put out counter intelligence via social media and maybe even updated their officers through social media. So it's definitely a powerful tool. I mean, in terms of the politics side of things, should governments, regimes, anything monitor social media?
Well, here's a good point that's just sprung into my mind. If Mr. Milliband is saying, why don't you use social media to stop war? Why don't we just use it to govern the country? Because we don't need a room of 60 guys all getting 100 grand a year, 2 flats and 2 cars, expenses billed. When all we have to do is, yeah, should we go to war with Iraq? Facebook, like or not? If enough people like the page, then you know, it's computerized politics, which, you know, Mr. Milliband is kind of shooting himself in the foot here. He's maybe doing himself a job. Maybe we don't need him.
Maybe we need a wee guy sitting in his bedroom with a bot clicking no.
We would never know how to get a bot that would do such a thing.
A wee guy in his bedroom, mate.
But you know, maybe should we just say, well, you know, let's turn the country over to Mr. Zuckerberg and get rid of Mr. Milliband and his party, because essentially local politics, everybody votes for a guy, he joins a party, that party then puts their votes together, then they get voted into House. Now they become a representative, which we kind of lose in this country. The Americans get it a bit better than us, but we lose the fact that if I have a problem, I should be able to talk to my local MP who can take it through and get it solved at a higher level. But we don't use it well in this country. But maybe we just get rid of. Maybe just get rid of House of Lords and we need 2 houses. Somebody could let us run wild.
The Facebook house and the Twitter house.
The Facebook, yes.
There's a lot. It's right what you're saying. Like, why not? I mean, elements of government, you could argue you want to connect with the younger voters, the younger generation. I know the last election, Facebook did a lot of good work and got people involved, and there's a running tally of young Facebook
Obama's campaign used Facebook and Twitter massively to get his people. They spent an awful lot of money in advertising and management, and you know, laws against advertising and political campaigns probably stopped them doing it here for the last one. And to be honest, the Conservatives didn't have to do anything, but they just had to show up pretty much at the end of the last one. But if it gets a bit competitive, they should be maybe using social media in brighter ways, you know, not using it to stop wars, because he's essentially putting himself out of a job there, I think. Social media is never to get the answer. They will come to the conclusion that they didn't need the government in the first place, because they can do it or themselves just be, you know, using, you know, what should the price of oil be today? Yeah, you've got 1 million people to vote in it, then you've got a true answer, rather than Jack McConnell on behalf of 150,000 people. There's one person's opinion on behalf of, you know, a couple of 100,000 people, when we could actually get 100,000 people to actually tell you exactly what they think. So, bye politicians, because they're all corrupt.
With social media, I think the amount of information that's out there in social media now will continue to grow exponentially. information could be monitored and mined and used as an outlet for freedom of speech and change, real positive changes, or it could go the other way into a sort of horrible 1984 sort of situation.
Totally.
Which would be a worry.
I think in summary, it's a cheap answer.
It's definitely a cheap answer. If you're
it's like just say whatever's popular. Yeah, in the 1990s, we just turned around and said, yeah, MTV can sort it. It's because that's where the kids are. But
as the leader of the opposition, yeah, it's an easy thing to say. Let's not send any of the boys in. Let's not lose any British lives. Let's turn a switch and put their social media back on.
Yeah, or world peace and all that. But maybe just let them. Maybe take oil out the equation and just let them deal themselves. We weren't rushing into the Congo and Somalia when they were having the exact same problems, but then again they didn't have minerals in the ground to fuel their cars. So I think it's an easy answer.
It's a big day for social media when it's getting mentioned as a solution to regime change and potential war. So there we go. Social networking's come a long way since from Mark Zuckerberg's bedroom.
Totally. So
let's go. If you anything you heard there you didn't disagree with, let us know on Twitter /Boyd Digital, on Facebook.com/Boyd Digital Live. If we are not seen again, or our internet connection is pulled down, or our videos are removed from said social media networks, I apologise. It's only a joke. Thank you. Goodbye. Night.